Thank you again for tuning in to our video interview series. We're interviewing local faith-based entrepreneurs and investors. Today I have Megan Murray with me. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So who are you and what do you do?
So I'm a licensed professional counselor here in Tulsa, but I am licensed in the states of Oklahoma and Texas. But I see all of my clients just online.
Yeah. So what was that shift like during the pandemic? Is that the reason why you went online instead of going face-to-face?
Well, I did. That's when I first had to get comfortable with doing that. At the time, I was working for Oral Roberts University as a counselor for their students, and we just had to go online, so I had to get comfortable with it. But actually, I made the decision to do that after having my son and just needing more flexibility, basically. Needing to work from home.
Yeah, so what are the type of people that you like to counsel and give therapy to?
I mean, if I could kind of pick my ideal client, I like people who have some spirituality to them that already kind of have that as a baseline. And for me, it doesn't actually have to be just Christianity. It can be across the board, but a belief in something bigger than themselves, I think is just a good starting place. And then from there, you know, you name it, like there's a lot of healing that can come just from that factor in and of itself.
Yeah, so when you were learning, I'm guessing you went to ORU?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you were learning kind of the science and the religion and therapy and different things like that, how did you kind of combine them all, or is that still something that you're learning and trying to implement?
Well, okay, so much of why I wanted to go to ORU was because a lot of the reasons people were coming in for counseling actually had to do with, I feel like, some faulty theology at times, just like different misinterpretations of the Bible, I think, that were really causing a lot of headache in their people's marriages and in their relationship even towards themselves. And so that's kind of part of what you learned at ORU was just how do you even address that kind of way of thinking that can come along with through a lot of fundamentalist Christianity, but there was also a lot of just how to even engage with people of faith. I felt like I really learned, like, essentially my professor told me that when the client comes and sits in front of you, that every interaction should be almost as if they were kind of getting to speak with Christ himself. Like you're trying to model those characteristics of just mercy and grace and unconditional love. And so it's kind of twofold. I learned how to handle the issues that came up around religion and also how to embody the best of it, of Christianity.
So what drew you to being a counselor and helping people?
My dad was kind of my first start in that because he's a licensed counselor, and so he would come home every single day and just around the dinner table, like, present to me, you know, the different like kind of clients that, like, the situations that they were in basically, and ask, you know, for my take on it. And I just found it fascinating to like human behavior, the human psyche. I really found it fascinating. And then that was just also kind of fit in with my larger feeling of like, what's my purpose? And it was really, I wanted to know that in some way I did leave the world a little better than I found it. And I just felt like this was kind of the avenue. I was almost groomed for it, you know, in the sense that my dad had prepared me for those type conversations. And then it just naturally fit in line with what I wanted to make from my life, how I wanted to invest in others.
That's awesome. So before you ventured out onto your own practice, what were you kind of doing before?
So right out of grad school, I got a job at a company here in Tulsa where essentially they answer the phone calls from the suicide hotline of people who've called from the 918 area code. So I went and worked with them for a couple of years, and it was essentially like you would take the phone calls, you would try and de-escalate things over the phone if you could, and then if not, like you and your partner would go and hop in a van and you would mobilely like dispatch out to their location. So you would, half of the time was out in the field and the other half was kind of spent on the phones. And then from there I went and I spent a couple years there, and then I went and worked with the students at ORU as a counselor there in their counseling center, and then came to work for myself. So
going back to the suicide hotline, being in the field and also on the phones too, how has that kind of shaped how you approach therapy now?
Well, for one, I got really comfortable kind of handling things like over the phone or even online. I got comfortable with that. I didn't always have to be just present with someone, but I also felt like I got super competent in just how to handle like the end of life, like the suicidal or homicidal thoughts, or just even when people are kind of, hallucinating, hearing voices. And so I got so comfortable with like the most catastrophic of kind of like what therapy could look like that it just gave me confidence kind of in the rest of my therapy world.
Yeah. And so let's switch topics a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your story in faith.
So I grew up in the church, been in the church my whole life, got baptized at a really young age. In some ways, I feel like I've had like 20 different testimonies because it's almost like an onion where there's been different seasons of my life where I've experienced God and he's kind of revealed himself to me in a way that's like, I don't know, I've just felt like my relationship got deeper and something clicked, like, oh, okay, this is maybe what it's supposed to look like. But I will say the most recent kind of testimony for me was probably when I was working at the suicide hotline and just essentially kind of being around, people who were so hopeless and were so hurting. And I just really, I don't know, it felt to me like there was just a spiritual attack or a spiritual presence there at times. And so it really, something clicked in me that there was truly more than just the physical, that there really is more realms than just what we can see. And so I started to fight for like my clients in a different way where I would almost really kind of bring in the spiritual side and let's just attack things with prayer, but let's also use counseling methods and proven techniques. And so, it's just kind of been a journey of evolving in my own faith, I guess.
Yeah. And so the integration of faith and especially therapy, it seems like it can go either like swing one way or the other way. And so how do you kind of find that balance of also being a Christian, using your faith, using some of the spiritual things, but then also, you said talking about using proven methods that are based in science, based in the world too. So where is that kind of, how do you integrate that together?
Well, okay, so if I have a client of Christian faith and they want to incorporate their Christianity into this, into the counseling sessions, then we absolutely do that. And it's like we'll almost use visualization techniques that we know are proven in counseling, and we'll incorporate just faith. This person's, our Messiah into this visualization, and we'll do different things like that. We'll incorporate prayer. But many of my clients are either non-believers or just from a totally different faith altogether. And so with those clients, I have to be very careful. You can't impose your values. That's how counseling works. So most of the time it's through it's through the way that I'm viewing them. I'm really kind of trying to look at them as my brother and sister in Christ and trying to see how did God envision for things to go for them, because when they come in and they're at their worst, it's really easy as the counselor to just want to believe them, yeah, that's pretty bad, you're in a pretty rough spot. But then when you sit there and go, no, I can see what God intended for you, then sometimes my faith is just more coming out towards my mentality of them more so than us actually being overt about it in the session. So
that's awesome.
yeah.
That's really powerful. So tell me more about some of the ways that you are a little bit different than other therapists or counselors.
I think just the myriad of things that I'll pull from, there is counseling and psychology practices, and even from there, I integrate and use just all of the different approaches there. But then I also have gotten really into studying Chinese medicine, and then also really interested in mindfulness practices. And so I'll just kind of pick and choose from all of these different areas and essentially create my own kind of method of counseling. But in the counseling that I do, a lot of times there is just mindfulness that we're doing where I'm asking them to kind of sit with a question that they have and sit and be still for a little bit. And it's been my experience anyways that in the stillness, the answers kind of come to people. So
yeah. That's awesome. And so for people that aren't seeing a professional at the moment, what are some of the groundworks that they maybe be able to help themselves, or some common practices that you might suggest for them?
I mean, I do bring up mindfulness a lot. I would have them do that. Just and there's plenty of apps out there where people can engage in that. That's helpful for anything from, you know, anxiety, depression, OCD. Just we don't do that enough. Just truly sit with stillness. And so, and there's a lot of different just kind of self-help books out there. But surprisingly, the one thing I would probably bring up the most is just doing things that add humor to life. Because that's something I even do a lot in my sessions is we'll like seriously belly roll laugh about some problems that people have, because it makes it lighter. It makes it lighter to just kind of, and it takes the weightiness out of it. So finding anything that you can find humorous, to self-help books, to mindfulness apps, all of those can be really helpful.
Tell me a little bit about your process. With people's mental health, there's no one size fits all. Mm-hmm. And so are there some things that are reoccurring that you try to help people with, on the range of where they need help?
Yeah, I think probably the ones that come up the most are depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, relationship issues. Those are probably the ones that show up repeatedly. And you're right. I mean, no size does fit all. And so I think it'd be really easy for me to, when a client shows up, to be like, oh, that's just classic textbook anxiety, and then want to go and just directly go into my way of handling that from counseling. But I do feel like that's where the Christian aspect comes in the sense that I really will, like, before session, kind of say a prayer where I ask God, give me some, discernment here. Give me listening ears to help me hear what's really going on. And, truly make me to be a vessel that you kind of get to speak through. And so when I create space for God to kind of have a different say in it, instead of me just jumping in and thinking, oh, let's take it this way, I've been surprised how much that little space will lead me to kind of go a different route with people. And so that's kind of the one factor that I think can change things. But
so it seems like as a counselor or therapist, there's so many things and emotions that you can kind of take on from other people. How are you finding that balance, especially being a new mother and then also being faith-based?
I mean, surprisingly, it feels really normalizing to me to sit in front of people who are feeling the full spectrum of emotions that I have felt myself. And so, because I do feel like every single person that comes and sits down, they're almost like, oh, like you're not gonna believe the thoughts I've had or what I've felt, or and just preparing for the shame. And then they go on to describe something totally normal that the last 20 people have also said. And so it's very normalized. Like, that's almost really helpful to me, in my day-to-day life, to just kind of, it helps put things in perspective for me. Like, I'm not a bad person. I know I didn't parent perfectly today. I know I wasn't the best spouse today, but neither was everyone else that I'm talking to. And in that sense, it's like, it's just soothing almost to just know, hey, I'm a part of a larger picture, just humanity in general. And so, I think it's almost comforting to know that.
Yeah. And so how do people reach you?
Primarily through psychologytoday.com. That's where most people go, and they can just find all their counselors locally. And so I get calls from there.
Awesome. Do you have your own website that they can directly reach you?
Yeah, it's mnmcounseling.com, because that's my initials, MNM. But yeah, mnmcounseling.com.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.